Hello and welcome. President Buhari signs revised 2020 budget of 10.8 trillion naira into law. Nigerian Immigration Service stops 58 doctors from travelling to the United Kingdom. Ondo State Chief Judge rejects notice of impeachment against embattled Deputy Governor by State House of Assembly. And World Health Organization says COVID-19 eradication is unlikely. Plus we'll have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later on news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Lagos State leads as Nigeria's total public debt portfolio climbs above 28 trillion naira in March.
On sports news tonight, the Nigeria Football Federation confirms conclusion of the 2019-2020 season, announces date for next season.
And from Abuja, embattled acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu, writes Inspector General of Police, demands his release on bail.
The President today signed into law a revised budget 2020 of 10.8 trillion naira following the passage of the bill by the National Assembly. The signing took place inside the council chambers of the State House Abuja with the Vice President, Professor Yamiya, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, Chief of Staff to the President, Ibrahim Gambari, some ministers and other government officials in attendance. The National Assembly had passed the revised budget, raising the total estimates to 10.8 trillion naira from 10.5 trillion sent to it by the President.
The 2020 amendment budget, which I have just signed into law today, underscores our administration's firm commitment to effectively contain the spread of COVID-19 and protect the lives and livelihood of our people. With these budget amendments, as well as our recently launched 2.3 trillion naira stimulus program, we are well positioned to safeguard the economy. Considering recent budget implementation challenges, I have directed that efforts be made to assure effective implementation of the Appropriation Repeal and Amendment Act 2020 in order to realize its laudable objectives. The Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning is in the process of effecting budgetary releases that will ensure that all ministries, departments, and agencies receive at least 50% of their amended capital budget by the end of this month. The Appropriation Repeal and Amendment Act 2020 that I have just signed into law provides for aggregate expenditures of 10.81 trillion naira, which is an increase of 216 billion naira over the level of expenditure initially proposed in 2020 Appropriation Act.
Meanwhile, the federal government is planning how to improve revenue generation between 2021 to 2023. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, said the revenue target for 2021 to 23 is estimated at 6.7 trillion naira, 7.8 trillion naira, and 8.6 trillion naira, respectively. She was speaking at a virtual meeting on the medium-term expenditure framework in Abuja.
It's the first time the Ministry of Finance will be holding a virtual consultative meeting with key players on the medium-term expenditure framework of 2021 to 2023. This is in keeping with the safety protocol on the COVID-19 pandemic. The Director General of the Budget Office expresses hope that inputs from Nigerians will make the MTEF proposal work in the interest of all Nigerians.
We have not been daunted by the present circumstances that have made it impossible to gather all of you together as we would normally do, but have gone ahead to figure out a way of making sure that we involve you in this in this consultative process.
It's not news anymore.
The Minister of Finance then gives update on how the events in the global markets has affected the nation's economy.
In terms of revenue performance, the federal government retained revenues in the revised budget is 5.365 billion. The actual performance is 1.4811 trillion, while the prorated performance is supposed to have been 2.622 trillion. This means there was an underperformance of 44%.
The nation's gross domestic product, according to her, contracted to 4.2% in 2020 as against previous projected growth of 2.9%. Contribution of the non-oil sector to the GDP declined from 92% in the first quarter of 2019 to 90% in the first quarter of 2020.
So the task for us is...
She lists key assumptions for the 2021 to the 2023 medium-term expenditure framework, which includes oil price benchmark, oil production, and revenue projections, amongst others.
We aim to keep the deficit within the 3% ceiling over the medium term and are therefore working on identifying new revenue sources and also new expenditure cuts so that we stay at or below the 3% deficit to GDP ratio as provided for in the Fiscal Responsibility Act.
The task of keeping the nation's economy remains very challenging at a time when the global economy is grappling with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Government officials say they are working on improving revenue generation to strengthen the nation's economy.
The signing of the revised 2020 budget today by the President marks the end of a series of events that have trailed the budget. This report examines the events in the build-up to the past budget.
The 2020 budget is one expenditure plan that has suffered some setbacks, having been intended to run for a 12-month cycle from January 2020 to December 2020. A budget of 10.3 trillion naira was initially presented by President Muhammadu Buhari to the National Assembly in October 2019. By November 2019, the Senate had passed the appropriation bill and transmitted to President Muhammadu Buhari for assent after increasing the figure to 10.59 trillion naira.
Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
The President subsequently signed the budget into law on his birthday, December the 17th, 2019. Sadly, in the course of implementation, the coronavirus pandemic set in and government was forced to review the budget. The revised 2020 Appropriation Amendment Act reflects a downward cut by the executive from the 10.59 trillion naira to 10.51 trillion naira. By June the 11th, the Senate had applied its input by beefing up the budget to 10.8 trillion naira. A breakdown of the figure shows that 2.9 trillion naira is earmarked for debt servicing, while recurrent expenditure gets 4.9 trillion naira.
Our target is to continue with the momentum that has started to ensure that we meet the January to December, the December budget deadline, and to be able to do meet the deadline for the budget, we have to get the MTEF done and approved because it forms the framework for the budget.
What the public may now seek to understand is the status of the first 5 months' expenses in the just signed budget and what effect is the COVID-19 going to have on the implementation of the budget.
To take a look at the revised 2020 budget and related issues, I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by an economist, Professor Uche Waleke. Thanks a lot, Prof, for joining us on the News at 10. Now, with all the disruptions that we saw in the economy, fantastic. With all the disruptions that we saw, are you actually surprised that we had that revision upwards?
I would describe the 2020 revised budget as a child of necessity. A child of necessity in the sense that by now we would have been 6 months into the implementation of the 2020 budget. Again, that brings me to commend the federal government efforts in at least restoring the budget cycle, to January, from January to December. It's just that COVID-19 is particularly affecting this one. So it's a child of necessity. In a period of recession, you wouldn't be reducing spending. If you want to stimulate the economy, if you want to avert a severe recession, as has been projected, your option, even what we know from theory, your option is to spend, and that is why we're having the if you like, the high figure, 10.8 trillion budget for 2020. So for me, it's justified. It's just that, of course, there are consequences. What that means is that it's also ballooning the fiscal deficit, and that will also mean more borrowing. But in a situation like we find ourselves, one can explain it. If you also look at the benchmarks, the assumptions that were used for it, I would also say that they're realistic. For one, we have not been a little ambitious, in a bid to close the fiscal deficit. The budget reference price is below $30 per barrel. And if you also look at the production cut in line with the agreement with OPEC, I understand what we have as our quota is 1.4 million barrels per day. And there is also an additional 300,000 condensates, which don't go into the figure. So if you take all that into consideration, you would agree with me that the 2020 budget has been based on realistic assumptions, including the medium-term expenditure framework, which the minister has told us is also ready, the 2021 to 2023. But the allocations, again, in my view, reflect the government priorities. If you look at the breakdown, works and housing is getting the largest chunk. Transport is also there, and of course power. So these ones are having the largest share in terms of capital expenditure.
All right, Prof. But if you
there's
look
also
at
agriculture.
Yeah, I can hear you. If you look at the timing, the president was talking about implementation, which is one thing we always talk about when we have the budget out. With the year half gone, if you look at it that way, how do you expect the budget to play out?
Also commend the president for coming out to say, for giving a matching order, if you like, to the Ministry of Finance, Budget and Planning, to ensure that ministry departments and agencies get at least 50% of their capital allocation before the end of the month. So what that means is that if that happens, there's a likelihood, there's a possibility that before the end of the year, we'll be talking about a significant rate of implementation with respect to the capital component, which hasn't been the situation previously. So I think the emphasis on capital component of that budget, even though it's not where one would expect it to be, because it's less than what we have voted for debt service. Debt service is allocated 2.95 trillion, whereas capital component of the budget is 2.23. So you discover that a situation where you are spending more servicing debt than you are spending on capital, of course, is not ideal. But as I said earlier on, these are unusual times. But again, I have to say this. It's important, too, that we look critically at the recurrent side. If you look at the current expenditure is about 4.95 trillion, close to 5 trillion. If you look at that recurrent spend, and you look at the portion that is service-wide vote, over 1 trillion, I am confident that, or I have reason to believe that some of the items there, can still be further reduced. One of them is contingency. You have contingency of 15 billion. That was the same thing that was provided for, in the 2019 budget. You also have items like, money we are paying for outsourcing services, 5 billion. And there is also one for international sporting events, 5 billion. international sporting events in a period of COVID-19 when we know that a number of these sporting events are not going to happen. So we should take a look at that section. That section has a lot of round figures. And with my training as an economist, as a chartered accountant, when you see figures that are completely round, so many of them, it puts you upon inquiry. So as I said earlier on, the recurrent side can be, one can further put a searchlight on that side with a view to, seeing how we can further cut it down. I also think what we have for defense, the recurrent spend for defense, what we are budgeting for recurrent for defense is also on the high side, over 780 billion naira. Again, we should take a critical look at that.
All right, thank you so much. Yes,
particularly, as I said earlier on, for service-wide votes. But in all, I think the government deserves a commendation, as I said earlier on, for ensuring that this is out and that implementation, kicks in immediately.
All right, Professor Uche Uwaleke, economist, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the news at 10 tonight as we crunch those numbers. Thank you.
Thank you.
And when the news at 10 returns in part 2 after the break, trigger-happy policeman kills 32-year-old man in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital. That's in a moment. Do join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. President Buhari signs revised 2020 budget of 10.8 trillion naira into law. Nigerian Immigration Service stops 58 doctors from traveling to the United Kingdom. Ondo State Chief Judge rejects notice of impeachment against embattled Deputy Governor by State House of Assembly. And World Health Organization says COVID-19 eradication is unlikely. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Do subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android, Fire TV, and Roku as well. 50 more COVID-19 patients have been discharged from the Lagos State isolation facilities. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu said in a statement that 6 of the patients were discharged from Agidingbe, 14 from Landmark Isolation Center in Etiosa, 22 from Unikon, 1 from Vidic, and 7 others from the Luth isolation facilities. They were all released after full recovery and testing negative for COVID-19. The statement adds that 13 of the patients are female and 37 are male, while 26 are foreign nationals. 58 Nigerian doctors who attempted to leave Nigeria for the UK have been stopped by the Nigeria Immigration Service. The service spokesperson, Sunday James, said in a statement that the doctors had concluded plans to leave the country via a special flight at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos. He explains that only 2 of the doctors had visas, while the remaining 56 did not. He says the 58 medical doctors were refused departure in line with Section 31, subsection 2A and B of the Immigration Act 2015, which prohibits departure of any person under the conditions stated in the Act. The statement adds that if the doctors had been allowed to leave the country, they could have been repatriated to Nigeria immediately. To legal matters now, where the Chief Judge of Ondo State has rejected the request by the State Assembly to set up a panel to investigate the State Deputy Governor Agbola Ajayi, who is accused of gross misconduct by some of the lawmakers. In a letter to the lawmakers, Justice Oluwatoyin Akeredolu predicated her action on the fact that the process required by the 1999 Constitution for setting up such a probe panel has not been completed by the lawmakers. The Chief Judge also attached a letter indicating that the matter of impeachment of the Deputy Governor is sub judice. 14 of the 26 Assembly members, including the Speaker, Bamidele Oleyalogun, had signed the impeachment notice served on the Deputy Governor, but was opposed by 9 of the lawmakers. On Wednesday, 2 members of the House were suspended over what was described as unruly behavior. Meanwhile, the majority leader of the House, Mr. Jamiu Maito, has also resigned his appointment. The 3 lawmakers were part of 9 members who were opposed to the impeachment notice served on the Deputy Governor, Agbola Ajayi. Let's cross over to Abuja now, and here's Linda Akigbe. Linda.
Hello, Ijoma. Welcome to Abuja. The embattled acting chairman of Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu, has written to the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, requesting his release on bail. Mr. Magu is being investigated over corruption allegations by a special presidential panel and has been in detention since his arrest on Monday. His lawyers said in a letter to the Inspector General of Police and signed by Mr. Oluwatosin Ojaomo that Mr. Magu has consistently denied all the allegations leveled against him by the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, and has provided both documentary and oral evidence to clear the air on all the allegations. He's asking the IGP to grant Mr. Magu an administrative bail in line with relevant directives to all police formations in the country not to detain any suspect for any offence which is bailable in nature due to the COVID-19 pandemic. He's also asking that Mr. Magu be granted bail on self-recognition pending the completion of the investigation into the allegations levelled against him so that he can adequately prepare himself for the defence. Meanwhile, the President has formally approved Mr. Magu's suspension from office as acting chairman of the EFCC. President Muhammadu Buhari has also approved that the EFCC Director of Operations, Mohammed Umar, takes charge of the activities of the Commission pending the conclusion of the investigation of the EFCC under Magu. A statement from the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, explains that the suspension is to allow for unhindered inquiry by the Presidential Investigation Panel currently probing the EFCC. More senior officials of the anti-graft agency are reported to be undergoing questioning by the panel, while Mr. Magu remains in the custody of the police for the 5th day. Also, searches have reportedly been conducted in the homes of Mr. Magu in Abuja, as well as some properties alleged to be owned by him in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, although outcomes of the reported searches have not been made public. The Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, Senator Godswill Akpabio, is asking the National Assembly to check against abuses of the budgeting procedures of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NEDC. He made the request during the continuation of the Senate's investigative hearing into allegations of financial recklessness by the Interim Management Committee of the Niger Delta Development Commission.
And my colleagues who have sacrificed so much.
It's the final day of an investigative hearing by a Senate ad hoc committee into allegations of financial recklessness by the Interim Management Committee of the Niger Delta Development Commission. The first day of the investigation reveals that the Commission spent 81 billion naira between October 29, 2019 to May 31, 2020, an expenditure which is puzzling to members of this committee.
None of them had ministerial approval.
It's the turn of the Minister of Niger Delta to appear before the committee to address the allegations of financial recklessness by the Interim Management Committee of the NDDC. He reveals that there were instances where monies budgeted had been drastically and illegally reduced by some members of a National Assembly against the originally approved fund.
We must reject the way we pass budget so that we can get it done on time. And please, sir, one more thing. It is important for us to come to the Parliament, to come to the chambers, both in the House of Reps and in the Senate, with the details of the budget. When you pass line budget, line items, health, 50 billion, education, 20 billion, this is, and then you say total 350, and then you drop the gavel. What normally happens is that two people, just two people, will take it to Hilton Hotel and sit down in Hilton Hotel to provide details. please extend my appreciation to the Senate President for not bringing the committee on NDDC to come and sit down here and sit in judgment over themselves.
But it appears that there exists a frosty relationship between the immediate past managing director of the NDDC and the Minister of Niger Delta.
So he came also with a draft, which I've submitted, with a draft letter that I should write and put it on my letterhead, implicating Senator Mobushi for collecting contracts in NDDC. I told him that I will not, I'm a lawyer, and that whoever alleges must prove.
Her interview with journalists also caused some tensions in the National Assembly.
The person that authorized it.
Don't say it.
I will say it.
Don't say it again. Don't say it again.
A two-day investigation of alleged financial recklessness in the NDDC is ending, and the committee is expected to submit its findings and recommendations to the Senate. Hopefully, these recommendations would help sanitize the NDDC and position it to achieve its mandate of developing the Niger Delta region.
Away from the National Assembly, the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency, retired Air Vice Marshal Muhammadu Muhammad, has cautioned Nigerians residing in areas identified as flood risk areas to evacuate their facilities immediately to avert any form of disaster that may arise as a result of flooding. Air Vice Marshal Muhammad says while 102 local governments are expected to experience a high rate of flooding, the agency has put in place measures to mitigate the impact.
Social media and others, targeting vulnerable communities to undertake mitigation actions and prepare for evacuation to safer grounds. We are stockpiling relief materials, that is food and non-food items that will be needed in providing succor to people that may be affected. We have also written letters to inform all the state governors, including the local government areas that may be affected by the flood, and also suggested the proactive mitigation measures that are expected to be taken, which include the following: informing the state emergency management agencies, frontline local government areas, and other response agencies to prepare for the flood; carrying out enlightenment campaign targeting vulnerable communities to undertake mitigation actions and prepare for evacuation to safer grounds; identifying high grounds for possible IDP camps to shelter evacuated communities; desilting river channels and canals; removing refuse, weeds, water hydrants, and floods from water channels, drainages, and on all avenues for free flow of flood water.
When the news returns, Lagos State leads as Nigeria's total public debt portfolio climbs above 28 trillion naira in March. That's on Business News. Join us again.
Welcome back to the news at 10 to security matters now. A 32-year-old man identified as Yamiya has been shot dead by a police officer at the Iwo Road Interchange in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital. The policeman was said to have stopped the car Mr. Ajayi was traveling in alongside his cousin on their way to work. Mr. Ajayi's cousin, who survived the incident after he was shot in the arm, narrates the ordeal, while the State Police Command also gave an account of the incident.
I was with my brother, my street brother. We are coming from Monoton. We are going to Egbeda at the Iwo Road under the bridge, in front of the Mr. Biggs. So I now realized a Micra, a taxi, was trying to maneuver his 3 cars behind my own car. So he was trying to maneuver. So the next thing I had is park. As I was trying to park, I just had a gunshot. And I saw my right arm, blood was rushing. My brother that sat beside me, he was shot dead at the spot. I thank God that I survived. They have condemned my hand.
The policemen from the Agodi area command were on a routine anti-crime patrol in that axis on the 9th of July 2020 at about quarter after 12 in the afternoon. At a point in time, they alleged that there was a noise from the other end where some persons were shouting "thief, thief." So in the process, they saw a Camry car, popularly called Big Daddy, and they flagged it down. The vehicle refused to stop according to their statement and was trying to maneuver his way. So in the process, one of the personnel in the team fired a shot to the vehicle, having two occupants, one Kayode Atonda and one Adeyemi. In the process, Kayode Atonda was hit with the bullet at his upper hand, while Adeyemi, the bullet met him at his abdomen.
Very, very sad incident there. Meanwhile, the police officer who allegedly shot dead a man in Olu local government area of Imo State yesterday has been arrested and taken into custody. The state police spokesperson says a full-scale investigation has been launched to unravel the circumstances surrounding the incident. The police described the action of the policeman as unethical and unprofessional, given the assurance that justice would be done in the matter. Youths and indigents of Olu town had trooped out in protest following the shooting of the man said to be a commercial motorcyclist for refusing to use a face mask and failure to give 50 Naira bribe. The pay-as-you-go system in telecommunication is not exactly applicable to pay TV and so will be difficult to achieve. And that's the position of the Chief Executive of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, Dr. Tunde Irukera, on discussions around the implementation of the pay-as-you-go system of operation for cable TV. The FCC PC boss was a guest on our morning program, Sunrise Daily.
My challenge with what sometimes is the discussion around pay-as-you-go in pay TV is that there is a disconnection. And we've been through this. We've conducted some investigations and done some surveys in different parts of the world. The pay-as-you-go model in telecommunications is not necessarily applicable. And so we confuse it sometimes with pay-per-view. Pay-per-view is not that you pay for what you view from the sense point of when you turn your television on. It is primarily that there are certain programs, maybe a boxing match, a soccer match, or some movies that are still in the cinemas, but that some of the pay TV operators have bought that content, and you can literally request, instead of going to a stadium or going to a cinema to watch, you can watch it in your home and pay for that view. That's pay-per-view. But we confuse it with pay-as-you-go. What people are asking for in pay-as-you-go is when you turn on your television and you're watching, you pay. When you turn off your television and you're not watching, you don't pay. It's difficult because what it is that the content has been created. What you're paying for is access. How you use the access is entirely discretionary and it's up to you. Quite unlike telephone where the clock starts and the airtime goes down. You've paid for content.
Let's take a look at some business news now. Here's Teniola Shobowale.
Thanks, Ijoma. Welcome to Business News. Nigeria's total debt portfolio rose to 28.63 trillion naira as at 31st March this year. And that's according to latest reports released today by the National Bureau of Statistics. Out of the total amount, state and FCT domestic debt was put at 4.11 trillion naira, with Lagos State accounting for 10.8%, while Yobe State had the least debt stock with a contribution of 0.7%. Further analysis of of the report shows that 34.89% of the debt of 9.99 trillion naira was external, while 65.11% of the debt, or 18.64 trillion naira, was domestic. The Central Bank of Nigeria early this week adjusted the Naira against the dollar at the official window, a move seen by many as plans by the Central Bank to unify the exchange rate market. The International Monetary Fund and investors have long called for Nigeria to merge its multiple exchange rates, saying the absence of a single rate creates confusion and deters foreign investment. The Central Bank had over time maintained that the market fundamentals do not support Naira devaluation and have made it a key objective to defend the Naira at a level which is not aligned with its fair value. Our business correspondent, Chimeze Obi-Iwaogu, takes a look at this move and what it means for the country.
It began in March in a gradual and reluctant acceptance. The central bank took the first step by moving the official rate from 307 naira to the dollar to 360 naira. Many called it devaluation, but the central bank called it adjustment of price. And now another adjustment has been made from 360 naira to 381 naira to the dollar.
So what the Central Bank of Nigeria tries to do is to ensure that we can get fair value. When an exchange rate is overvalued, the demand for its domestic commodities, right, becomes lower, and your exports are not competitive. When it is cheaper, then people buy your goods, buy your currency to buy your goods.
An adjustment became inevitable and imperative when Nigeria's terms of trade, which measures the relative price changes of its exports against the price change of its imports, has deteriorated. Tough as this move by the central bank may be, captains of industry believe the benefits can be deferred.
The rate has moved up, but if you look at it going forward, we will be able to laugh at the end of the day. We'll be very happy at the end of the day because we are now not going to be requiring the foreign exchange to import our raw sugar. We'll be producing it domestically. So if we produce domestically, it should actually not cost us much.
The Naira depreciated at the investors and exporters window this Friday to close at 386 Naira 50 kobo, marginally down by 0.06% from 386 Naira 13 kobo. For now, the Bureau de Change operators are officially not in business, and so what we currently see on the streets is speculative.
And the central bank gives each of these BDC about $75,000 weekly, which gives an average of about $225 million on a weekly basis. So with such injection coming back into the system, the injection coming back into the system, I want to believe there's only one direction the Naira would go, Naira would strengthen.
You may choose to call it an adjustment, depreciation, devaluation, or a crawling peg. As long as it reduces the level of overvaluation, it will get the job done. Like they say, it does not matter whether it's a black cat or a white cat. What matters is that it kills the mouse. Chimeze Obi-Iwaogu, Channels Television News.
Now, after a mixed trading session, the stock market returned to positive territory, ending Friday's session with moderate gains. Temple Ashwaju tells us more.
Thank you for joining us again on the Stock Market Report. The bulls had the upper hand at the equities market in 3 of the trading sessions this week after ending Friday's trading session in the green, up by 0.12%, and of course after gaining some 15 billion naira. Now the rebound, which comes amid losses on the share price of big lenders such as GT Bank, FBN Holdings and UBA, was driven largely by nearly 1% increase on MTN Nigeria's share price, while 12 other stocks added some support to the market. Now, traders say that today's trading session was tepid as investors were cautious in their interest for stocks, as you can see on the activity chart, where nearly 900 million naira was staked in more than 131 million units of shares. Now, the shares of livestock feeds is number one on the gainers list with 9.8% increase and 8.53% load shedding placed on ABC Transport ahead of 8 other companies that ended in losses, while, of course, the trio of Zenith Bank, Sterling Bank, and UBA were top on the trades list for the day. And that's your stock market reports. I'm Temple Ashaju.
And that's business news tonight. It's back to you, Ijoma.
Thanks a lot, Teniola. Still ahead on the news at 10, World Health Organization says COVID-19 eradication is unlikely. Plus more stories from our London studio in Around the World in 5. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The World Health Organization says COVID-19 eradication is very unlikely. Dr. Mike Ryan, head of the WHO Emergencies Program, advises that extinguishing clusters of this infection, and very quickly too, could help the world avoid a major epidemic. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Hong Kong will close all schools from Monday after the territory reported a new spike in locally transmitted COVID-19 infections. 147 new cases were reported in the territory over the past 7 days, a record for the area in such a short time. The outbreak comes as new infections have swept other cities that had previously looked to have brought the pandemic under control, such as Australia's second largest city, Melbourne. Meanwhile, Italy has banned entry to people coming from 13 countries that it had said presented an excessive rate of COVID-19 infections. The ban applies to everyone who has spent any time in any of those countries within the past 2 weeks. And the first coronavirus case has been confirmed in Idlib in northwest Syria, sparking fears the resulting outbreak could have devastating effects in the overcrowded refugee camps in the region. Around 6 million people in total are estimated to be internally displaced in the country. Iran's capital has been hit by another explosion, with the latest blast reportedly at a missile plant to the west of Tehran. This unverified footage was uploaded to Twitter by a user claiming this was the 7th explosion to hit Tehran in the last 10 days and that it caused a power outage. Officials have denied those reports, saying that power cuts were related to the routine activities of the local energy company. Key sites, including nuclear facilities and oil refineries, have been damaged in recent incidents in the country. China's embassy in Kazakhstan has warned its citizens to take precautions against an outbreak of pneumonia in the country that the embassy says is more lethal than COVID-19. The diplomatic mission said there had been a significant increase in the number of cases of a form of pneumonia of unknown origin. Kazakhstan's healthcare ministry branded this as fake news. However, Kazakh state news agency reported this week the number of pneumonia cases had increased more than twofold in June as compared to the same period last year. The mayor of the South Korean capital, Seoul, Park Won-soon, has been found dead hours after his daughter filed a missing report to police. Mr. Park was found on a mountain near the capital's suburbs. Local officials released a note that the mayor had left on his desk before he was found. The apparent suicide came after one of Mr. Park's former secretaries filed a complaint alleging the 64-year-old had sexually harassed her. Malaysian police have summoned reporters and staff of the news broadcaster Al Jazeera for questioning over a documentary on the country's arrests of undocumented migrants. Police have said they're investigating potential sedition, defamation and violation of the country's Communications and Multimedia Act. The journalist's lawyers said his clients refute the charges. Rights groups have raised concerns over crackdowns on media freedoms under Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin's government, which came to power in March. Police have fired tear gas at demonstrators in Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where thousands marched against the appointment of the new Independent Electoral Commission chairman. In the capital, demonstrators tore down the walls of one of the offices of the former president, Joseph Kabila's party, and marched towards the Parliament building before being dispersed by police firing tear gas. One opposition party has accused Ronsard Malonda of helping former President Kabila to rig the elections. Botswana wildlife officials have discovered 6 more carcasses of elephants which have died in unknown circumstances. Local officials are currently investigating hundreds of unexplained elephant deaths, and it's still not clear what is killing the animals around 2 months after the first bodies were found. Authorities said they were expecting to receive test results this week on samples sent to South Africa and Canada. For the first time since they were designed to protect Venice from rising tides, Project Mossa has been tested in a public demonstration of the strength of the defences. The multi-billion euro system of 78 yellow mobile barriers that can be lowered or raised according to the water levels was started in 1984, but it has been plagued for years with delays and rising costs. The tests come after Venice was hit by the worst floods in more than 50 years, which left the historic St. Mark's Square submerged. Project Mossa is not expected to be fully functional until next year. And finally, in Switzerland, Zurich Zoo has presented its new baby white rhino to the world. Called Ushindi, it's only 2 months old. White rhinos are critically endangered in the wild, mainly due to poaching. But Ushindi is safe in the zoo and was a hit not only with the viewing public, but also with the zoo's zebras, who seemed particularly curious to check out the new arrival. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thanks a lot, Simon, one of the wonders of the world. To Sports Now, here's Jeffrey Ozong.
Thanks, Ijoma, and welcome to Sports News. The Nigeria Football Federation has ended the 2019-2020 league season owing to the COVID-19 pandemic and declared that there will be no promotion and relegation. The Football Federation at its meeting ratified the points per game format used to rank teams in the Nigeria Professional Football League. The NFF stated that the top 3 clubs in the final table will feature in the African Inter-Club competitions for 2020-2021 season. The NFF also announced that the 2020-21 season will start from September and October and end in May 2021, subject to the full reopening of the country and the approval of health authorities. The German Football Association and the German Football League have confirmed that fans may be able to return to stadiums to cheer on their heroes in national team and Bundesliga matches in September. The two bodies are working with health authorities on ways to reduce the risk of infection from COVID-19 at matches, as well as on the way to and from the stadium. Most sporting events were shut down earlier this year owing to the pandemic, while some leagues have resumed and matches have been played behind closed doors. The All England Lawn Tennis Club announced that the prize money set aside for Wimbledon Championships will be distributed to 620 players who were set to take part in this year's cancelled tournament. The tournament, which was initially scheduled to begin in June, was cancelled for the first time since World War II owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. The club said from an agreed total of $12.6 million, 224 single players from the qualifying round will receive $15,000 each, while the 256 players in the main draw will receive $31,000 each. And that's it on sports. It's back to you, Joma.
Thanks a lot, Ekaite. And the main news again. President Muhammadu Buhari today signed the revised 2020 budget of 10.8 trillion naira into law. The president had made an adjustment to the budget to conform with the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also today, the Nigerian Immigration Service stopped 58 doctors from traveling to the United Kingdom. The NIS said 56 of the doctors had no UK visas. And the World Health Organization today said COVID-19 eradication is unlikely. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Do have a great weekend, but stay safe while you try to do that. Good night.